Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, please join me in waiting another couple of minutes. Okay, let's try that again. At this time, please join me in welcoming to the stage Lieutenant General Susan Lawrence, U.S. Army retired, President and CEO of AFCEA International.
Good afternoon. Where did 3 days go? Again, thank you to everybody in participating this year. It's been a great show, just amazing demonstrations and exhibits by our industry partners, and we know that takes a lot of work, so we really, really appreciate it, and we thank you. So if you haven't had time to finish eating, please continue to enjoy this great lunch. And before we invite our keynote speaker to join us, I'd like to make a brief presentation, and you saw them just a minute ago on the stage. But each year at WEST, the United States Naval Institute and AFCEA recognizes the service of those military members who have been selected by their commands for particularly superior service in the past year. We call them the Enlisted Superior Performers. And I would like to ask the ESPs to stand again so that we can recognize you. Congratulations. We can't do what we do, as I said, without our industry partners. And today we would like to recognize Lockheed Martin as the sponsor for our lunch. At this time, I would like to invite Dion Vergoots, Vice President of Spectrum Convergence, to the stage. Dion.
Well, good afternoon, colleagues. I'm Dion Vergoots, Vice President of Spectrum Convergence at Lockheed Martin. I'm always excited to attend the WEST conference, which serves as an opportunity for us to connect and dive deep into solving the most significant challenges facing maritime defense together. And this year's theme, our acquisition and readiness on pace to meet global security dominance or demands, is indeed a significant challenge and question where each of us has a part to play in addressing. As we navigate the rapidly evolving global security landscape, the defense industrial base stands at the forefront of a transformative change, one that necessitates what Lockheed Martin terms as the 21st century security strategy, emphasizing the aggressive acceleration of digital technologies rooted in standards-based open systems architectures, promoting interoperability and flexibility across the defense spectrum. Efforts like the Marine Corps' Force Design is reliant upon the acceleration and advancement of these digital technologies, specifically communication layers enabling ubiquitous and secure connectivity across the contested battle space. Programs like the Open Systems Interoperable Reconfigurable Infrastructure Solution, or OSIRIS for short, at Camp Pendleton serves as not only a pathfinder for the potential 5G and future G to revolutionize battlefield communications, but also a model for leveraging commercial and defense industry partnerships to foster a new era of military readiness and strategic agility. The path to meeting global security demands hinges on our ability to cultivate innovation and collaboration across government and industry to create a more responsive and resilient defense ecosystem. Through transformative technologies and embracing collaborative frameworks, we can ensure that the acquisition and readiness are not only on pace, but are setting the pace for a secure and peaceful future. Thank you all for your partnership and collaboration over the few days. And with that, I'd like to welcome General Lawrence back to the stage.
Thank you, Dion, and thank you to all your personal support to AFCEA International. It is now my pleasure to introduce this afternoon's keynote speaker. General Christopher Mahoney entered the service in the Marines in 1988. He's a career aviation officer with over 5,000 hours of flight time in the A6, F5, F-18, and F-35. He was sworn in as the Assistant Commandant on November 3rd, 2023. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome the 37th Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Christopher Mahoney.
All right, I love the music. General Walsh said they were going to play the Blues Brothers when I came up here. Well, General Lawrence and Admiral Spicer, first of all, thank you. If this is a reflection of AFCEA International and USNI and their partnership for over 34 years, I could only call it a success. My evidence is out behind those doors and the participation of all of you in here right now. So thank you to both of you, and thank you to everybody who made this happen, but moreover, thank you to our industry partners and all our distinguished guests for making this week a good one. Now, I know I'm the last one to speak, and typically during the beginning of the week, it's all good news. We want to buy these widgets, we want to buy these gadgets because they're going to make us better. And then we get Admiral Skillman up there with General Adams, and they talk about the budget. So to continue the trend, but just kidding, your expectations are really high or really low, depending on your level of endurance, but I will try to be brief. For the next few minutes, I hope to build upon the theme of readiness and resourcing, and also put an exclamation point on the criticality of the sea service, not only to the nation, but to the global order. The sea services, that is the Navy, the Marine Corps, and the Coast Guard, have protected a global system of maritime commerce for which the entire world has benefited enormously. For the people in this room, I know that's not really a bold statement. However, I would argue that our sea services have reached a point in their readiness and capacity that is no longer acceptable. I would argue that we, the capital we, the national we, need to reprioritize and accelerate resources that the sea services need to preserve our national interests. So let me try and emphasize the point. Let's go back in time a little bit. Let's go back to September 2nd, 1945, otherwise known as VJ Day. Looking back reminds us of the vital role that the Navy, the Marine Corps, and the Coast Guard played in preserving America's preeminence and strength in that era. On that day in 1945, Chester Nimitz sent a message to the fleet expressing his belief about what would be essential to maintain our position and preeminence in the world order. Nimitz said something like, "It is necessary to maintain our national strength, our national power, at a level which will discourage future acts of aggression aimed at the destruction of our way of life." The destruction of our way of life. On that day, 80 years ago, representatives of the Imperial Japan stood on the deck of the USS Missouri and they signed the instrument of surrender. In a display of firepower never seen on the planet, over 300 warships were moored in Tokyo Bay. Hundreds of bombers and fighters flew overhead. This impressive show of strength, though, was just a small sliver of what the sea services could bring to the fight. At its power apex in 1945, the sea services included over 7,500 ships, 6 infantry divisions, scores of air wings, manned by nearly 4 million sailors, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen. 4 million. Victory, though, and the ensuing peace, as you know, was dearly won. Blood and treasure of over 400,000 American dead, 670,000 American wounded, and a defense spending that exceeded at the time over 40% of our GDP. So what did that victory in World War II buy us? It enabled what many call the Pax Americana, the American peace, the greatest period of economic growth in human history, where the global GDP in adjusted numbers, looking at Admiral Skillman, he wants to know if they're deflated or not, from 1945 to 2023, from just under 9 trillion to over 105 trillion. America's sea services have been guarantors of this growth by ensuring freedom of maritime commerce, which drives over 80% of that number I just quoted. But America has not been the sole benefactor of these guarantees. Adversaries and allies alike have gained access to markets and commodities that previously would be unimaginable. They have gained access to markets and commodities that previously were well beyond reach of those who did not possess the naval power to guarantee their trade. Ironically, even those who challenge that order, even those who continue to make false claims to the global commons, have also been the beneficiaries of this order. But we must underscore that freedom of the seas, freedom for that economic pump, has not always been a given. It has not been the norm throughout history unless there was a force there to enforce it. The Navy that Admiral Nimitz led in 1945 did not simply appear after Pearl Harbor. That fleet, the greatest the world has ever seen, began as legislation through the vision of President Roosevelt and Congressman Carl Vinson, well before the war started. While most of the ships at anchor in Tokyo Bay, their keels were laid during World War II, they were a product of the prescience and presaging of a government that realized that they were dislocated from the coming reality. The first Naval Act of 1934, the second Naval Act of 1938 created the conditions for us to construct that fleet post-Pearl Harbor. Created the conditions long before we went to war. I would ask, are those conditions in place right now? FDR's vision for naval expansion was based on a two-ocean Navy. Right now, the requirements of our naval services are global, all the oceans. To further emphasize the point, we only need to look at current events. Freedom of the global maritime commons is now being tested to a degree that we haven't seen in decades, potentially with devastating results. In the Red Sea, the South China Sea, the Taiwan Strait, the Black Sea, the Horn of Africa, Strait of Malacca, and other critical waterways, state and non-state actors are aggressively challenging freedom and access to what otherwise would be the maritime commons. As we speak, if you pick up a newspaper or read it online, the Houthis have proven capable of disrupting critical sea lines of communication by exercising land-based sea denial using suicide drones and cruise missiles. Their success has shown that even what might have been classified as minor adversaries can achieve outsized results by disrupting the global economic system. As a result of recent attacks in the Red Sea, shipping and insurance costs have gone up between 15 and 20%, depending on what book you read. That's just in the last few months. Again, who pays for these increases? Who pays for the increased insurance, the cost of increased transit time, or supply chain disruptions? I think we know the answer. We do. Our families, our friends, our neighbors, our allies. We pay for it. Well, those costs will keep going up. They keep skyrocketing, if not for the United States naval power and that of our allies. If not for that power, it would be the Houthis who controlled access to the Red Sea. It would be the Houthis who decided what flag you could fly on your container ship or what port you could call on to do business. The risk of future global economic meltdown is real if our key slocks and maritime choke points are interdicted for any period of time. Given this present threat and others, it's becoming clear that we need to reassess the capacities of our sea services if we desire to deter and counter these burgeoning threats for the long haul. There's no substitute for forward deployed naval forces. When it comes to the capacity and capability to deploy and operate forward, there is no truer maxim than virtual presence equals absolute absence. This is not a novel assertion, but it's one worth repeating. For this reason, Secretary of the Navy, Secretary Del Toro, publicly advocates for a new maritime statecraft. It encompasses not only naval diplomacy, but a national whole-of-government effort to build comprehensive U.S. power, both commercial and naval. The CNO, Admiral Franchetti, my shipmate, built upon the Secretary's comments by recognizing that for a war-fighting Navy, she needs more players on the field. That field consists of the oceans, which comprise over 70% of the Earth's surface. While other nations and federal agencies help to protect international shipping, their efforts would fail without the backing and enforcement of the most capable and credible players on the field: the U.S. Navy, the Marine Corps, and the Coast Guard. Yet our ability to protect the maritime commons hangs in the balance. The U.S. Navy is no longer the largest in the world by ship count. We face constant challenges in maintaining the ships in our inventory. And while we still maintain a qualitative advantage over the Chinese, that gap is closing. The Heritage Foundation's 2024 Index of Military Strength was released last month, and it highlighted many of the current concerns and limitations. The report asserts that the Navy needs a battle fleet of no less than 400 manned ships to do what is expected today. The report also underscores that the nation's inadequate shipbuilding capacity and limited maintenance and repair infrastructure continue to negatively affect naval readiness. It's clear that our shipbuilding industrial base, has been shrinking over decades. It is time to reprioritize and more fully resource this critical national security requirement. Now, the Heritage Report gives the Marine Corps higher marks in general. We got a 73. Now, that's a C-. It's not a grade I would want my kids coming home with. But if we have a 73, why can't we have an 83? Why can't we have a 93? Our current capacity and readiness challenges within the sea service are more than a national issue. This is a global issue. In my mind, the sea services are inseparable in any evaluation, whether it's good or bad, whether we receive good or bad marks. There's a connection there, and you can't break it. Without an adequately resourced, manned, and equipped Navy, then the Marine Corps' ability to perform its assigned mission also suffers. A strong Marine Corps, if that's what we're rated by Heritage, with no organic littoral mobility, is incapable of providing global crisis response, one of our core missions. It can't move, maneuver, and sustain as a stand-in force. It can't support our allies and partners. Similarly, without a Marine Corps that can see the enemy, help blind the enemy, fight and kill the enemy in a weapons engagement zone, seize key maritime terrain, contribute to sea denial, our fleet will be less effective at deterrence, at campaigning, and at warfighting. The 2022 National Defense Strategy rightly identifies our strong network of allies and partners as a center of gravity, a primary source of strength and strategic advantage. While our allies and partners certainly make invaluable contributions in protecting maritime commerce, their naval capacity is limited and cannot replace our own. No other nation can project power and maintain a global presence like the U.S., and it is critical that we maintain our maritime primacy. In Indo-PACOM, a robust U.S. naval presence is required to cheat time, to cheat distance, and to deter and, when required, defeat a peer threat. And it's not just our interests, it is for global interests. Over 60% of the world's trade as a percentage of global GDP transits the Indo-PACOM. As alluded to earlier, that treasure, that amount, must be protected. The urgent need for a robust U.S. naval presence in the region is underscored by the history and interrelationships of our allies and partners there. And while we have relationships with many nations across Indo-PACOM, we lack a critical underlying alliance that provides assured security in the region the way NATO is designed to do for its member states in Europe. The United States and Japan, the Mutual Defense Treaty with the Republic of Korea, the Mutual Defense Treaty with the Republic of the Philippines, strategic alliance with Thailand, our alliance with Australia. These bilateral agreements are all critical to ensuring freedom of the commons and a free and open Indo-Pacific. Nonetheless, we have no formal foundation and no formal guarantee that our allies and partners in the Indo-Pacific will respond as a collective in any contingency. Access, basing, and overflight are not a given for us in the Indo-Pacific. For this reason, our naval assets, which represent sovereign U.S. soil and provide unparalleled flexibility and mobility, are absolutely critical. We must demonstrate to our allies that their investment in us is worth it. We must demonstrate that we are with them across the crisis to conflict continuum, from being the first to assist when natural disasters occur, to training alongside them to improve our collective skills, to campaigning together to deter, and when required, fight shoulder and shoulder to win. The Marine Corps is all in. Our commitment to joint and combined campaigning in the region is our standard. Every day, over 26,000 Marines are forward stationed or deployed in Indo-PACOM. These 26,000 Marines, our sentinels on land and sea, are holding the line alongside our Navy and Coast Guard compatriots as part of the joint force model and alongside our allies and partners. This does not come for free. The price of the United States global leadership is not cheap, but American people have benefited enormously from it. We should remind ourselves of this fact often. To that end, we must ensure a level of capability, capacity, and readiness for the sea services that are equal to the Herculean tasks of campaigning, deterrence, and combat. Now, I appreciate that it's tempting in peacetime to focus on domestic issues, but we must not lose sight of the fact that national defense underwrites, as I mentioned earlier, our economic prosperities and freedom. To prevent the catastrophe of global conflict or of economic disaster, we must devote more resources to maritime deterrence. There's a famous quote from President Calvin Coolidge. All right, maybe it's not that famous, but it comes to mind. He said, look, the chief business of the American people is business. Americans are profoundly concerned with producing, investing, buying, selling, and prospering in the world. In the world. The price of protecting this business of America is a stronger Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard. To preserve our peace and prosperity, we need to revive a serious national dialogue. We need to understand that what is at stake is no less than our way of life, to channel Chester Nimitz. Our freedoms and values and the economic prosperity for which our forebears fought and sacrificed is what's at stake. We must pay the cost now to protect our Pax Americana, or we risk paying exponentially more later with interest. Admiral Nimitz might agree. Once again, everybody, thank you for your attention. Semper Fidelis. I think we have time to take a few hits.
We have the microphone in the center aisle if anybody would like to ask a question.
All right.
Hi, I hope the Commandant is doing well. We miss him.
All right, well, let me stop you there. I spent an hour on the VTC with him on Friday. He is bored, he is restless, and he's in a fighting stance. And we hope to have him back here before very long at all. But not too quick. We want him back bench pressing 350 before he comes back.
That's awesome.
Thanks for that.
Yeah. So my name is Catherine. I'm from Tritus, and I am wondering, I see a lot of innovation and not willing to wait with the Marines. My grandpa was a Marine, frozen chosen, still kicking at 93. And I'm wondering, how do you keep fostering that innovation so that way we can stay ahead of the adversary to ensure that we are ahead in the fight?
Well, first of all, thanks to your chosen veteran heroes all. And our hats are off to them, and I think that bounces off what I just talked about as far as our gratitude. How do you do it? Culture and climate. Innovation, I think it's part of a Latin root that means new. You got to keep it new. You have to foster a culture where people can think and behave in new ways, and then a climate which can actually make something out of that. It doesn't come free either. You've got to put resources behind it. You've got to have a structure that fosters it. The Marine Innovation Unit that we just stood up, which is made up of mostly reserve officers and enlisted who, in their civilian jobs, come from little-known companies like Alphabet and Amazon. And we use that energy to turn into innovation for the Marine side. And then we have, structurally within the active component, the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab, who I cannot keep up with intellectually. They're constantly bringing in those new ideas, looking at requirements and trying to align them with a solution intellectually, a concept, a model, a prototype, and going as quickly as we possibly can. Does that get after your question? So there's a culture, and then there's a climate that needs to foster it, and of course there's resources that need to escort that.
Thank you.
You bet.
General, good afternoon. Diego Lage with Signal Magazine.
Hey, Diego.
General, which are the key capabilities for the next year or two, not in the long-term planning, that you're looking to adopt, especially from small businesses?
Wow. So force design has left the station, all right? And the key tenets of force design, whether they're unmanned systems, autonomous systems, electronic warfare, long-range precision fires, I think there's a place in each of those efforts for small business. And we have to make the route for small business straighter, faster, and clearer to bring you on board early. So in those things that we continue to work on that are becoming reality now, we need to present those opportunities to small business. It looks like I didn't get after it.
Of course, I'd like to know if you have plans to expand and enlarge the structures that you have to onboarding, to get on board all these businesses and to ease their transit into, supplying the Marines.
So the Marine Innovation Unit is a great example of expanding. Taking a known talent pool, putting structure around it, and then putting it in battery. Marrying that up with the university system, with the Defense Innovation Unit, and of course with the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab. So I would say yes, and that's an example of it.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Hi, General. Mallory Shelbourne with USNI News.
Hey, Mallory.
Wanted to ask, so the V-22 grounding is more than 2 months now. Can you talk about how Bataan is making do out in 5th and 6th Fleet without those assets?
Yeah. First, I'd say that my confidence in the V-22, having flown in it, is extremely high. The only thing higher than that is my confidence in the pilot and my confidence in the observers, the crew chiefs, and the maintainers and the procedures that they train to and are really good at. Specific to 26 MU, there is a grounding bulletin that's out there. They have not been able to fly, but what they have been able to do is cycle their pilots back through simulators in CONUS. I don't know whether they sent some to Japan, but to stay on the front edge of that the simulation environment will allow you to do. As well, we've been doing maintenance turns and keeping the airplanes ready so that when the grounding bulletin does get lifted, we're ready to go. So we're leaning as far forward as we can based on the authorities that we have. And when we get either an interim flight clearance or a flight clearance, we'll be ready to go. Does that answer your question, Mallory?
It does, thank you.
Okay, but now let me take it one step further. Are we creating an operational gap? You bet we are. You bet we are. 12 V-22s that are the backbone of our assault support lift that can't do the job. So we've had to use surrogation, we've had to use surface-to-surface connectors. But I will say this, if there is a crisis that comes, there are authorities out there where we could start flying again.
Thank you, sir.
Kai Alberg, U.S. Naval Institute member. My question's about logistics. I suspect in the case of a conflict, getting to the first island chain might not be the most difficult thing. It might be to sustain yourself once you are there. As far as logistics, what do you see as the major challenges and what's on your wish list to meet those?
Two things come to mind immediately. When you say logistics in the Pacific, having spent a lot of my adult life over there flying, are the immense distances involved, even in the short distances. So where, in other cases, that was supposed to be a joke. In the cases where we used to talk about the last tactical mile, in the Pacific, even in the first island chain, you're talking about the last tactical 500, 600 miles. So how do we cheat that distance? How do we cheat that time? The way I look at it, the fundamental problem of logistics will always be there. How do you take a lot of things, move them somewhere on a continual basis so that the people who require it have it where and when it's needed? In the particular case of First Island Chain or the Western Pacific, to me there are three segments to it. There's an aviation segment where, in the Marine Corps sense, CH-53s, V-22s, KC-130Js. There is a terrestrial segment which we're building, and this might get after what you're talking about, and that's a terrestrial segment of global positioning, using access and basing and overflight authorities to put things forward that by definition cheat distance. And then there is a maritime component to it where the heaviest of things and the biggest bulk things travel typically over water. And we need to close that. In the case of the Marine Corps, what we're looking at as a material solution is the medium landing ship, or LSM. So I'm a fighter guy. I look at it and I say, this thing is a pickup truck. It shouldn't be a Cadillac. It should be something that we can employ in large numbers move great distances, and continue to move shore to shore in order to move stand-in forces, in order to maneuver them to places of advantage, and in order to, as you bring up, sustain them. Now the key is we will be exposed to almost ubiquitous surveillance. We'll be exposed to a system that can target us very quickly. We'll be exposed to a system that within that target array can sort and probably find us if they want. And we need to work through systems to destroy that kill chain equation at each point. And that is the tough part. Maneuver, decoy, deception, electronic warfare, direct and indirect masking, all of those are techniques that we would use to get inside and destroy an adversary's kill chain.
Thank you.
You bet.
Good afternoon, General Bill Hamblett, Naval Institute
Bill.
Proceedings. Sir, your prepared remarks struck me as very Mahoney-ian, not in terms of fleet-on-fleet engagements, but in terms of Mahan's talk about and writings about protecting commerce, of protecting your own commerce, but also deranging that of your adversary. Implied there is, in your remarks, I also took away the sort of the implication that if you don't like the cost of the Navy and the Marine Corps, wait till you see the cost of not having them, right? So in your testimony on Capitol Hill, when you talk to congressional leaders, is that theme resonating? Do they understand the risk to national economies, the national, the standard of living that most Americans have, if we didn't have the strength at sea that we really need to have?
You know, I can't speak directly for any member of Congress, but when I speak to them now, there is an acknowledgement of that issue. There is an acknowledgement of that problem where we need to, the price of deterrence, as dear as it might be, is minuscule compared to the price of fighting a high-end fight that, in my mind, would metastasize almost immediately globally, almost immediately. You can't say that there is a global system of maritime commerce, introduce a high-end fight, and say that it's not going to impact that entire system. And I think there is an acknowledgement of it. The follow-on is, so what do they do about it? What can be done? That's when I talk about a national discussion. We're a very rich country. We're a very satisfied country. It is very difficult to impress upon people that there is a fast-paced moving change of the security environment, that if we let it move too quickly, we will find ourselves unable to close the gap, and the price that I talked about will go up exponentially. So there is an acknowledgement, and we have discussions. What are we doing about it? Does that get after it, Bill? Yes, sir.
Lieutenant Windling, 55th Aeroport Squadron. Sir, I wanted to ask a little bit different question about permeability. So as members move from active duty, reserve, guard, et cetera, is there more action being taken? Because I know right now it is a huge process, and if you want to go active duty, you better start active duty, because going from, say, reserve to active duty or guards is a whole other deal. But is there action being taken to try and make it so our members can transition to what's most appropriate for their stage of life, or for what they want to do, how much they want to put into, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, and right up front, my observation, I went to Beaufort to train on F-35s. I had a couple of instructors that were reservists, and I asked them what their future was going to be, and they said, well, you know, I'm going to move away and I'm going to get out of the reserves. And I said, well, why are you doing that? And they had a list of things. And it was all things that we could change by policy or by order or by reasonable engagement with Congress. So my takeaway from that is we do not compete very well, in that market. To your specific point of permeability, what I have is my visual is a, active transport across a membrane here. You can go one way or go the other. I'm looking at Pete Daly. We probably took the same class at Holy Cross. He got a better grade. One of General Smith's top 5 priorities is better use of the reserve. The other flip side of that coin is better use of the active reserve symbiosis is what it ought to be. And if permeability is the term of art, so that you can go one way based on the factors that you talked about, or come back the other way. We have to, and he will do it, and we will do it, look at the things we can control immediately, policies to rewrite, orders to rewrite, and then engage if there's some statutory relief or change that we need. So, direct answer to your question, yes. One of the top 5 priorities is just that.
Thanks, sir.
There's 32,000 reserve Marines out there that have unique, sometimes exquisite capabilities and talents that we need more access to on a more regular basis. There are people in the active component that have exquisite, unique, great talents that want to keep those talents aboard in the reserve. Why would we not make it easy for them? Why would we not make that a facility and not a chore? So that is the direction we're going, just to follow up on that a little bit.
That was our final question. Please welcome General Lawrence back to the stage.
Thank you, team. Thank you so much. Sir, on behalf of AFCEA International and our partners, United States Naval Institute, we have a small token of our appreciation. Delivering Destruction by Chris Hemler from the Naval Publication. Thank you so much for spending the time. We know it's hard to get away and spend this much time out here with us, so we really appreciate it.
General, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you very much.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for attending WEST24. I knew all I had to do was walk the floor and listen to everything that was going on out there. And we just have the official count in. We broke last year's registrations, sponsorships, and exhibits. On registration, we had almost 11,000 individuals registered. And a lot of events will say, oh, we registered this many people, but how many people showed up? This year we had 9,467 printed badges, largest ever. Thank you so much. Now, a couple things to note for next year. We actually are changing the date because of the availability of the conference center here, so please note, next year, WEST is going to be 28 to 30 January 2025, and we will be on the other end again in halls A, B, and C, so please make note of that. You know, we love getting input from you however we can get it, but if you go to your WEST app, there's an actual survey in there. We would really appreciate your feedback on what we can do better to support you at this event, so please take a moment and let us know. With that, I wish you all, as well as Admiral Ray Spicer, safe travels home, and we look forward to seeing you next year.